I'm Marcus, 26 years old, and 3 days ago, I inherited $847 million and control of Blackstone Industries. The same family who threw me out at 14 for being gay just showed up at the estate reading with tears in their eyes, claiming they made a mistake and always loved me. But when my grandfather's legal team started talking, their faces went white as sheets. Before I dive into this insane story, let me know in the comments where you're reading from. Hit that upvote if you've ever dealt with family who only show love when there's money involved, and follow for more wild inheritance drama. The Golden Years, ages 0 to 14. Growing up, I thought I had the perfect American family. We lived in a sprawling estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. Old money, country club memberships, the works. My father, Richard Blackstone III, was being groomed to take over Blackstone Industries, a conglomerate my great-great-grandfather built from a single steel mill in Pittsburgh. My mother, Patricia, came from equally prestigious stock. Her family owned half the commercial real estate in Manhattan. My grandfather, Richard Blackstone Jr., was the family patriarch. At 6'4", with steel gray hair and piercing blue eyes, he commanded respect in every room he entered. Forbes consistently ranked him among America's wealthiest individuals. But to me, he was just Grandpa Rick who taught me chess on Sunday afternoons and took me sailing on his yacht every summer. The Blackstone family had a reputation to maintain. We attended the right schools, belonged to the right clubs, and married within the right circles. Tradition wasn't just important, it was everything. Family portraits lined the halls of our estate, showing generations of Blackstone men who had built and maintained the family empire. I was expected to be the next in that line. My childhood was privileged beyond measure. Private tutors, ski trips to Aspen, summers in the Hamptons. I attended Exeter Academy, where tuition alone cost more than most people's annual salaries. My parents had already mapped out my future: Harvard for undergrad, Wharton for business school, then a carefully orchestrated rise through Blackstone Industries until I eventually took the helm. But there were signs that I was different, signs I was too young to understand the implications of. While my male classmates talked about girls, I found myself noticing boys instead. I assumed everyone felt the same way, that it was just a phase that would pass. My parents certainly never discussed such possibilities. In the Blackstone household, certain topics simply didn't exist. The family's social circle was small but powerful. We regularly hosted dinner parties for senators, CEOs, and old money families whose names appeared on museum wings and university buildings. I was expected to charm these guests, to demonstrate that the next generation of Blackstones would uphold the family's sterling reputation. My father, Richard III, was everything the family could want in an heir. Charismatic, brilliant, ruthless in business, but charming at social events. He'd graduated summa cum laude from Harvard, where he'd been captain of the rowing team and president of his final club. My mother was equally impressive. Vassar educated, fluent in 4 languages, and capable of organizing charity galas that raised millions for carefully selected causes. They expected the same excellence from me, and for 13 years, I delivered. Straight A's, captain of the debate team, varsity tennis player. I spoke French and Spanish fluently, played piano at a near professional level, and could discuss literature, politics, and business with adults twice my age. I was being molded into the perfect Blackstone heir. But perfection, I would learn, had very specific parameters in my family. The cracks began to show, age 13-14. 8th grade at Exeter was when everything started falling apart, though I didn't recognize it at the time. I developed an intense friendship with my roommate, Jake Morrison, whose family owned a media empire based in Los Angeles. Jake was everything I wasn't: relaxed, funny, unimpressed by wealth and status. He taught me how to sneak out after lights out, how to order pizza to be delivered behind the gymnasium, and how to be a normal teenager instead of a miniature adult. Our friendship deepened over months of late-night conversations about everything from philosophy to our fears about living up to family expectations. Jake's parents were divorced, something unthinkable in my family's world, but he seemed happier and more authentic than anyone I knew. He talked openly about his feelings, his doubts, his dreams that had nothing to do with inheriting his family's business. One night in February, during a particularly heavy snowstorm that had knocked out power to half the campus, we were huddled in our dorm room talking by flashlight. Jake had been telling me about a girl he dated over Christmas break, and I felt a strange jealousy that I couldn't quite understand. When he asked about my romantic interests, I found myself stammering, unable to articulate feelings I was only beginning to recognize. "It's okay if you don't like girls," Jake said quietly in the darkness. "My older brother is gay, and he's the happiest person I know now that he stopped trying to be someone else." The words hung in the air like a revelation and a death sentence combined. For the first time, someone had given me permission to acknowledge what I'd been feeling, but couldn't name. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing through every interaction, every feeling, every moment of confusion from the past few years. Over the next few weeks, Jake and I talked more about identity, about the pressure to conform to family expectations, about the difference between who we were and who we were supposed to be. For the first time in my life, I felt like someone truly understood me. Our friendship began evolving into something deeper, though we were both too scared and inexperienced to fully understand what was happening. The relationship was discovered during spring break. Jake had come to visit me in Greenwich, officially to work on a joint history project. My parents were hosting a major fundraiser that weekend, so the house was full of staff and caterers preparing for the event. We thought we had privacy in my wing of the house. Mrs. Caldwell, our head housekeeper, found us kissing in my bedroom while delivering fresh towels. The look of shock on her face instantly communicated the magnitude of what had just happened. In a household where every detail was scrutinized and every action had consequences, there were no secrets. Within an hour, my parents had sent Jake home with a driver and confined me to my room. The fundraiser proceeded as planned that evening. Appearances had to be maintained, but I could hear my parents' urgent whispered conversations throughout the house. Phone calls were made behind closed doors. The family attorney was summoned for an emergency Sunday meeting. The confrontation, March 15th, age 14. The family meeting took place in my father's study, a dark paneled room dominated by oil paintings of previous Blackstone patriarchs. My parents sat behind the massive oak desk like judges preparing to deliver a verdict. My grandfather was conspicuously absent, which should have been my first warning that something unprecedented was happening. "Marcus," my father began, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it, "we need to discuss your behavior with the Morrison boy." I'd prepared for this conversation during the sleepless hours since Jake's departure, but sitting across from my parents' disappointed faces, all my rehearsed explanations evaporated. The shame wasn't about my feelings for Jake. Those felt real and honest, in a way nothing else in my carefully orchestrated life ever had. The shame was about disappointing people I'd spent my entire life trying to please. "It was just confusion," I lied, grasping for any explanation that might restore their approval. "We were just experimenting. It didn't mean anything." My mother's expression didn't soften. "Confusion implies uncertainty, Marcus. Mrs. Caldwell described a scene that suggested you were quite certain about your preferences." The clinical way she discussed it made everything feel dirty and wrong. These weren't the parents who had cheered at my tennis matches and beamed with pride at parent-teacher conferences. These were strangers evaluating a problem that needed to be solved. "This lifestyle," my father continued, "is incompatible with your responsibilities to this family. The Blackstone name has been built on traditional values for over a century. We cannot and will not allow that legacy to be compromised." I tried to explain that my feelings didn't define my ability to run a business or represent the family, but they weren't interested in nuance. In their world, perception was reality, and the perception of having a gay heir was unacceptable. "We've arranged for you to spend the rest of the school year with Dr. Harrison," my mother announced. "He specializes in helping young men overcome these difficulties." Dr. Harrison ran what he called a therapeutic boarding facility in rural Montana. I later learned it was conversion therapy, though the term wasn't used in our household. The brochure spoke of helping young men develop appropriate masculine identity and traditional family values. I begged them to reconsider, promised I would change, swore I would never act on my feelings again. But their decision was final. The Blackstone heir could not be gay, and if I couldn't understand that, I needed professional help to correct my thinking. "What about Grandpa Rick?" I asked desperately. "Can I at least say goodbye?" My parents exchanged a look that should have warned me, but I was too panicked to interpret it properly. "Your grandfather agrees that this is the best course of action," my father said. "He's disappointed, Marcus. We all are." Those words shattered something inside me. Grandpa Rick, who had been my strongest supporter and closest confidant, had signed off on sending me away for being who I was. The betrayal felt complete. Exile and survival, age 14 to 18. Dr. Harrison's facility was a converted ranch in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by mountains and hundreds of miles from the nearest city. 23 boys between ages 13 and 17 lived in dormitory-style buildings, following a strict regimen designed to correct inappropriate attractions and instill masculine values. The program was psychological torture disguised as therapy. We were forced to participate in aggressive sports to build masculine confidence. We attended daily sessions where our feelings were pathologized and shamed. Any sign of what Dr. Harrison called feminine behavior resulted in isolation and additional counseling. The other boys came from similar backgrounds, wealthy, conservative families who preferred sending their sons away to admitting they had gay children. We weren't allowed contact with the outside world for the first 6 months. No phone calls, no letters, no internet access. We existed in complete isolation from everything we'd known before. I spent my 15th birthday in that place, marking another year older with a group therapy session about choosing heterosexuality through discipline and faith. No card from my parents, No call from Grandpa Rick. It was as if Marcus Blackstone had ceased to exist the moment I'd been honest about who I was. But isolation also brought unexpected strength. Away from the pressure to perform perfection, I started understanding who I actually was beneath the expectations. I read everything I could find in the facility's limited library. I learned to find comfort in my own thoughts, rather than constantly seeking approval from others. Some boys broke under the program's pressure, convincing themselves they'd been cured and returning to families who watched them carefully for signs of relapse. Others, like me, learned to be quiet about our truth while never abandoning it. We developed an underground support network, sharing books, protecting each other from the worst of Dr. Harrison's methods, and maintaining hope that this wasn't forever. After 18 months, I aged out of the program. At 16, I was considered an adult under Montana law and could choose to leave. But leaving meant having nowhere to go. My parents had made it clear that returning home required proof of successful treatment, essentially bringing home a girlfriend and maintaining the pretense indefinitely. I chose homelessness over lying about who I was. Building a new life. Age 16-26. Life on the streets of Denver was brutal but honest in ways my privileged childhood had never been. I slept in shelters, worked whatever jobs would hire a teenager without a permanent address, and slowly learned to navigate a world without safety nets or family support. The transition from Greenwich mansions to Denver homeless shelters would have broken many people, but those months at Dr. Harrison's facility had taught me to survive psychological pressure. Physical hardship felt manageable by comparison. At least on the streets, no one was trying to convince me that my identity was a disease that needed curing. My first break came through Marco, a counselor at one of the youth shelters, who recognized potential in me despite my circumstances. He helped me get my GED and connected me with a scholarship program for homeless youth at the University of Colorado, Denver. "You're clearly educated," Marco told me during one of our counseling sessions. "Whatever brought you here, you've got advantages most kids in your situation don't have. Don't waste them." I couldn't tell him about my background. The Blackstone name would have led to questions I wasn't ready to answer. Instead, I crafted a story about aging out of foster care. It was close enough to the truth. I was a teenager without family support, trying to build a life from nothing. College was my salvation. I threw myself into business studies with the intensity of someone who knew education was his only path forward. I worked 3 jobs: campus security at night, research assistant during the day, and tutoring wealthy students who paid more for a single session than I made in a week at my other jobs. My professors noticed my dedication and analytical skills. Dr. Sarah Chen, who taught corporate strategy, became an unexpected mentor when she recognized that my insights into business operations went far beyond textbook learning. "You think like someone who's been around business your entire life," she observed after I presented a case study analysis that impressed the entire class. "Where did you develop that understanding?" I deflected with vague references to growing up around successful people, which was technically true. Dr. Chen didn't push for details, but she began recommending me for internships and research opportunities that accelerated my career prospects. By my senior year, I was working as a research assistant for a private equity firm downtown, analyzing potential acquisitions and market trends. My supervisor, Jennifer Walsh, had started her own investment fund after 15 years at Goldman Sachs. She offered me a full-time position after graduation with a starting salary that felt like winning the lottery. "You have an instinct for this work that can't be taught," Jennifer told me when extending the offer. "I don't know where you learned to think about business the way you do, but I want that perspective on my team." The irony wasn't lost on me. I was succeeding in business using skills learned at the knee of a grandfather who had disowned me for being gay. Every merger analysis and market evaluation drew on lessons from those Sunday afternoon conversations when Grandpa Rick had explained the thinking behind his major decisions. Love and success. Age 22-26. My personal life began stabilizing alongside my career. I met David Martinez during my final year of college at a volunteer event for homeless youth. He was completing his residency in emergency medicine and volunteering his time to provide health care for people who couldn't afford it otherwise. David came from a middle-class Mexican-American family in California who had supported him through medical school with love, sacrifice, and unwavering belief in his potential. His parents' acceptance of our relationship was a revelation after growing up in a family where love felt conditional on meeting impossible standards. "Family isn't about perfection," David's mother, Rosa, told me the first time we visited for Christmas. "It's about showing up for each other, especially when things get difficult." Their warmth and inclusion highlighted everything I'd lost when my biological family chose reputation over relationship. But it also showed me what real family looked like. People who chose to love and support each other regardless of circumstances. David and I built a life together based on mutual respect and shared values. He never pushed me to discuss my estrangement from my biological family, understanding that some wounds were too deep for casual conversation. When I told him about my past, I focused on the conversion therapy and abandonment without revealing the Blackstone name or family wealth. Professionally, I continued advancing at Jennifer's firm. My analysis of tech startup valuations proved particularly insightful, and by age 25, I was managing a portfolio worth over $200 million. Jennifer began grooming me for partnership, recognizing that my unconventional background gave me perspective other analysts lacked. "You understand desperation in ways that most people in our industry don't," she explained during one of our quarterly reviews. "That helps you see opportunities and risks that others miss." Companies led by people who've had to fight for everything they've achieved tend to be more resilient than those run by people who've never faced real adversity. I'd built a life I was genuinely proud of. David and I had just bought a beautiful craftsman house in Denver's Highlands neighborhood. I was on track for partnership at the firm and had started angel investing in startups founded by LGBTQ entrepreneurs and people from disadvantaged backgrounds. My net worth had reached the low 7 figures through careful investing and living below my means. For the first time since leaving home, I felt genuinely happy and secure. The phone call that changed everything, March 3rd, 2024. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my home office when the call came. The number was unfamiliar, but something about the area code made my stomach tighten. Connecticut. I'd avoided anything connected to my past for so long that seeing those digits felt like a ghost reaching across time. Marcus Blackstone? The voice was crisp, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes," I answered cautiously. "This is James Whitmore from Whitmore, Sterling & Associates. We represent the Blackstone family estate. I'm calling to inform you that your grandfather, Richard Blackstone Jr., passed away 3 days ago." The words hit me like a physical blow. Grandpa Rick was dead. The man who had taught me chess and business strategy, who had been my hero until he wasn't, was gone. 12 years of unresolved feelings crashed over me simultaneously. Grief, anger, love, betrayal, loss. "I'm sorry for your loss," I managed, though I wasn't sure if it was my loss or just a polite response. "Mr. Blackstone left specific instructions regarding your inheritance," Whitmore continued. "He has named you as his primary beneficiary. I need to schedule a meeting to discuss the details of his estate." The room seemed to spin. Primary beneficiary? After 12 years of complete silence, Grandpa Rick had left me something, and primary beneficiary suggested it wasn't just a token gesture or guilty conscience payment. "I think there might be some mistake," I said. "My family disowned me years ago. We haven't spoken since I was 14. "There's no mistake," Whitmore assured me. "Mr. Blackstone was very specific about his intentions. He's left you controlling interest in Blackstone Industries, along with his personal assets and real estate holdings. The estate is valued at approximately $847 million. I had to sit down. $847 million. Control of Blackstone Industries. Everything my father had expected to inherit, everything I'd been raised to eventually manage, was being handed to the family reject who'd been sent away for conversion therapy. "Why?" I whispered. "He left a letter explaining his reasoning," Whitmore said. "The will reading is scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m. in our Greenwich office. All family members will be present to hear the terms." All family members. My parents, who had sent me away rather than accept who I was. Relatives who had acted like I'd died the moment I'd been honest about my sexuality. They would all be there to watch me inherit the empire they'd expected to share. "Will you be able to attend?" Whitmore asked. I thought about David, about the life I'd built, about the family that had shown me real love and acceptance. Then I thought about Grandpa Rick and the questions that had haunted me for 12 years. What had he really thought when they sent me away? Had he ever regretted his decision? Had he been watching from afar as I rebuilt my life? "Yes," I said. "I'll be there." Returning to Greenwich, March 8, 2024. The flight from Denver to New York gave me 5 hours to process what was happening. David had offered to come with me for support, but I needed to face this alone. 12 years of carefully constructed emotional barriers were crumbling, and I wasn't sure who I would be on the other side of this experience. Whitmore, Sterling & Associates occupied 3 floors of a prestigious building in downtown Greenwich, the kind of old money establishment that had handled Blackstone family affairs for generations. James Whitmore himself was exactly what I'd expected. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to managing vast wealth and complex family dynamics. "Marcus," he greeted me with unexpected warmth when I arrived. "Thank you for coming. Your grandfather spoke of you often over the years." That simple statement rearranged everything I thought I knew about the past 12 years. Grandpa Rick had spoken of me? To his attorney? What had he said? Why hadn't he reached out directly? "I have to admit, I'm confused about all of this," I told Whitmore as he led me to a conference room. "My family and I haven't had any contact since I was 14. I assumed they'd written me off completely." "Your grandfather was a complicated man," Whitmore said carefully. He made decisions he later regretted, but pride and family pressure made it difficult for him to correct course. This inheritance is his attempt to set things right. Before I could ask for clarification, voices in the hallway announced the arrival of other family members. 12 years vanished in an instant as I heard my father's distinctive laugh and my mother's high-pitched social voice. My stomach clenched with the same anxiety I'd felt as a teenager trying to meet their impossible standards. The conference room door opened and my past walked in. My father looked older but fundamentally unchanged, still commanding, still perfectly groomed, still carrying himself with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. My mother had aged more dramatically, with new lines around her eyes and a brittleness that hadn't been there before. Behind them came my Uncle Robert, my Aunt Catherine, and several cousins I barely remembered. The silence when they saw me was deafening. Whatever they'd expected from this will reading, it clearly wasn't the reappearance of the family member they'd erased from their lives. Marcus? My mother's voice was barely a whisper. Oh my God, Marcus, is that really you? She moved toward me as if in a trance, her eyes filling with tears. You look so grown up, so handsome. I can't believe. She reached for an embrace that I couldn't reciprocate. I stood stiffly as she wrapped her arms around me, her familiar perfume triggering a flood of childhood memories that I'd spent years suppressing. We've missed you so much, she sobbed into my shoulder. We've thought about you every single day. My father's approach was more reserved, but equally emotional. Son, he said, his voice thick with feeling, we made a terrible mistake. We were scared and stupid, and we've regretted it every moment since. The other family members clustered around, all expressing shock at my appearance and joy at our reunion. Cousins who had once been my playmates acted as if no time had passed. Uncle Robert clapped me on the back and declared how proud the family was of the man I'd become. We never stopped loving you, my Aunt Catherine insisted, tears streaming down her face. We just didn't know how to fix what had been broken. Their performances were flawless. Grief for lost time, joy at reunion, and love that had supposedly endured despite 12 years of silence. If I hadn't lived through the reality of their abandonment, I might have believed them. But I remembered the coldness in their eyes when they'd shipped me off to conversion therapy. I remembered the silence that had followed, the complete absence of any attempt to reach out or check on my welfare. Whatever emotions they were displaying now, they hadn't existed when I'd needed them most. Please, everyone take your seats, Whitmore interrupted, clearly recognizing the tension in the room. We have significant matters to discuss. The reading, March 8th, 2024, 10 a.m. The formal reading of Richard Blackstone Jr.'s will was unlike anything I'd experienced. Whitmore's assistant distributed thick leather portfolios to each family member, while Whitmore himself prepared a presentation that suggested this would be more than a simple recitation of bequests. Before we review the specific terms of Mr. Blackstone's will, Whitmore began, I want to provide some context about his final years and the decisions he made regarding his estate. He activated a large screen that displayed a timeline spanning the past 12 years. From 2012, when I'd been sent away, to 2024, when Grandpa Rick had died. Mr. Blackstone spent considerable resources tracking Marcus's life and progress after he left the family, Whitmore announced. He hired private investigators, monitored academic records, and maintained detailed files on Marcus's achievements and circumstances. My family's shocked expressions were genuine this time. They'd had no idea that Grandpa Rick had been watching me from afar. He also documented his regret about the decisions made in 2012, Whitmore continued. Multiple diary entries and letters express his desire to reconnect, but also his belief that Marcus was better off without the family that had failed him so completely. Whitmore opened the first portfolio. The estate of Richard Blackstone Jr. totals $847 million in assessed value, including controlling interest in Blackstone Industries, real estate holdings across 6 states, investment portfolios, and personal property. My father leaned forward expectantly. This was the moment he'd been preparing for his entire life, assuming control of the family empire. To my son, Richard Blackstone III, Whitmore read, I leave the Greenwich estate you were raised in, along with $5 million in liquid assets, sufficient to maintain the lifestyle you've known, but not enough to perpetuate the mistakes I've made. My father's face went white. $5 million was substantial by most standards, but it represented a tiny fraction of the total estate. And the wording suggested judgment rather than generosity. To my daughter-in-law, Patricia Blackstone, I leave $2 million in the contents of the main house, with the exception of items specifically designated for Marcus. My mother made a small sound of distress. Her expected windfall had just evaporated. To my brother Robert and his family, I leave $1 million each, with the hope that they will learn from my mistakes about the difference between family loyalty and family love. Uncle Robert's face had gone ashen. He'd clearly expected much more than what amounted to a token bequest. The remainder of my estate, Whitmore continued, including controlling interest in Blackstone Industries, valued at $780 million, the Hamptons estate, the Colorado Ranch, all investment portfolios, and my personal effects, I leave to my grandson, Marcus Blackstone, with the following provisions. The room fell silent, except for my mother's quiet crying. I felt dizzy as the magnitude of what was happening sank in. Not only was I inheriting the vast majority of Grandpa Rick's wealth, I was inheriting control of the family business that had been built over 5 generations. Marcus must agree to take active control of Blackstone Industries within 6 months of my death, Whitmore read. He must maintain the company's headquarters in Connecticut and preserve employment for current workers. He cannot sell or transfer more than 25% of his holdings for a period of 10 years. Those provisions made sense from a business perspective, but they also meant I couldn't simply cash out and disappear. Accepting this inheritance meant engaging with the family business, and by extension, the family that had rejected me. Furthermore, Whitmore continued, Marcus has the sole discretion to determine what level of involvement, if any, other family members will have in company operations. Previous management contracts and board positions are terminated as of my death. My father's shock was visible. He'd spent 40 years expecting to inherit control of the company, and now he was learning that his disowned son would determine his future role, if any. Finally, Whitmore said, removing a sealed envelope from the portfolio, Mr. Blackstone left a personal letter from Marcus to be read aloud to all family members present. He handed me the envelope. My hand shook as I broke the seal and unfolded several pages of my grandfather's familiar handwriting. My dearest Marcus, I read aloud, my voice steadier than I'd expected. If you are reading this, it means I have died with the cowardice I lived with for 12 years. The cowardice that prevented me from reaching out to correct the greatest mistake of my life. I could hear my mother's quiet sobbing, but I continued reading. When your parents decided to send you away for being gay, I failed you in the most fundamental way possible. I chose family conformity over family love, and I have regretted that decision every day since. You were my favorite grandchild, my chosen successor, and the person I was most proud of in this world. Losing you was losing the best part of my legacy. My father made a sound of protest, but Whitmore silenced him with a look. I hired investigators to track your progress, not out of nostalgia, but because I needed to know if the boy I loved had survived the trauma we inflicted. What I learned filled me with both grief and pride. You survived conversion therapy, homelessness, and abandonment. You built a life based on merit rather than inheritance. You found love with someone who values your character over your bank account. I had to pause, overwhelmed by the revelation that Grandpa Rick had known about David, about everything I'd accomplished. You became the man I hoped you would be despite our failure, not because of our support. The business acumen you've demonstrated in your career proves you inherited the Blackstone talent for commerce, but your integrity proves you escaped the Blackstone curse of valuing reputation over relationships. The letter continued for several more paragraphs, detailing specific achievements he'd observed and expressing pride in choices I'd made. He'd known about my volunteer work, my mentorship of homeless youth, my relationship with David's family. He'd been watching and caring from a distance while I believed myself completely abandoned. I'm leaving you the family empire, not because you need it, but because you're the only person I trust to transform it into something worthy of our name. The money and power that corrupted your father and me might be tools for good in your hands. I looked up to see my father's face contorted with rage and humiliation. Hearing his own failures cataloged in front of the extended family was clearly devastating. Your parents and the rest of this family will undoubtedly attempt to manipulate you with belated expressions of love and regret. Please remember that their abandonment of you revealed their character, just as your success, despite that abandonment, has revealed yours. The final paragraph was the most emotionally devastating. I know I have no right to ask forgiveness for my cowardice, and I suspect you've built a life that doesn't require my approval. But please know that sending you away was not about disappointment in who you were. It was about fear of who I was. I was too weak to defend the person I loved most against people whose opinions should have mattered least. I hope this inheritance can serve as both an apology and an investment in the future I should have helped you build 12 years ago. I finished reading and folded the letter carefully. The silence in the room was complete except for the sound of multiple people crying. Whitmore cleared his throat. There are additional documents detailing the private investigators' reports and your grandfather's diary entries from the past 12 years. Marcus, you're welcome to review those at your convenience. My mother was the first to speak. Marcus, honey, we had no idea your grandfather felt this way. If we had known, you would have what? I interrupted, looking directly at her. You would have suddenly been okay with having a gay son? You would have called off the conversion therapy? My father tried to interject. We were different people then. We've learned and grown. You've learned that I'm inheriting $800 million, I said bluntly. That's what's different. The mask was slipping from their performances now. I could see the calculation behind the tears, the financial motivation driving their sudden acceptance. That's not fair, my Aunt Catherine protested. We've all missed you terribly. The family was never the same after you left. I didn't leave, I corrected her. I was thrown out for being honest about who I was. There's a difference. Whitmore intervened before the conversation could escalate further. Marcus, you don't need to make any decisions about family relationships today. The inheritance is yours, regardless of how you choose to interact with other family members. But I was realizing I needed to address this directly. These people had spent 12 years pretending I didn't exist, and now they wanted to pretend those years hadn't happened. The manipulation was transparent, but it was also infuriating. I need to ask you something, I said, looking around the room at faces that had once been central to my world. In 12 years, did any of you ever try to contact me? Send a birthday card? Check if I was alive? The silence was answer enough. Did any of you ever question whether sending a 14-year-old to conversion therapy was the right thing to do? Did you ever wonder if I was okay, if I needed help, if I was even alive? More silence. But somehow, 3 days after learning I've inherited a fortune, you've all suddenly remembered that you love me and miss me and want to be a family again. My mother stood up abruptly. We were protecting you, she said desperately. That lifestyle would have destroyed your future, your reputation, everything we'd worked to build for you. What lifestyle? I asked. Being honest, being authentic, loving someone who loves me back? Being gay, my father said bluntly, apparently deciding subtle manipulation wasn't working. It would have ruined everything. The business relationships, the social connections, the family name. The family name, I repeated. That's what this was always about, wasn't it? Not my happiness, not my well-being, but protecting the precious Blackstone reputation. I stood up, decision crystallizing. Well, congratulations. You successfully protected the family reputation by throwing away the family member who threatened it, and now that family member controls the family business. The implications of that power dynamic were clearly sinking in for everyone present. I wasn't just rich now. I controlled their access to the company that had employed several family members and provided consulting contracts to others. Marcus, my father said carefully, I hope you'll consider what's best for the family business. Emotions aside, Blackstone Industries needs experienced leadership. I've been preparing to run this company my entire life. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, even after everything, he was positioning himself as the logical choice to help manage the inheritance he'd never expected me to receive. You're right, I said calmly. The company does need experienced leadership. Fortunately, I've spent the past 4 years managing a $200 million investment portfolio and analyzing corporate acquisitions. I think I can handle it. My Uncle Robert tried a different approach. Marcus, we're family. Whatever happened in the past, we should work together moving forward. The company has provided for all of us for generations. You're absolutely right that families should work together, I agreed. That's exactly what my real family has been doing. David's family welcomed me with open arms, supported my career, and celebrated my successes. They never once made their love conditional on my ability to provide them with money or status. I gathered my copy of the will and prepared to leave. Thank you, Mr. Pong. Whitmore. I'll need time to review all the documents and make decisions about the company's future leadership. Marcus, please, my mother called out as I reached the door. Don't let anger destroy what we could rebuild. We're still your parents. I turned back to face her. No, you're not. Parents don't abandon their children for being gay. Parents don't send 14-year-olds to conversion therapy. Parents don't spend 12 years pretending their child is dead. You were my biological parents, but you forfeited the right to call yourselves my family when you chose reputation over relationship. What about forgiveness? My Aunt Catherine asked. What about Christian values and family healing? The irony of being lectured about Christian values by people who had shown me none was almost funny. Forgiveness doesn't require me to pretend the past didn't happen, or to trust people who have already proven they'll abandon me when it's convenient. You want forgiveness? You have it. You want a relationship? That ship sailed 12 years ago. I left them sitting in stunned silence, processing the reality that their rejected family member now controlled their financial futures. Processing the magnitude. March 8th, April 15th, 2024. The next month was a whirlwind of legal meetings, financial planning, and emotional processing. Whitmore connected me with a team of advisors to help navigate the transition from middle-class professional to billionaire business owner. The learning curve was steep, but my background in investment analysis provided a foundation for understanding complex financial structures. The most challenging aspect wasn't the money. It was confronting 12 years of assumptions about my grandfather's feelings. Reading his private diaries and investigator reports was like discovering an alternate history where someone had cared about my well-being all along. He'd known about my academic achievements at the University of Colorado. He'd received copies of news articles about my investment firm's successful deals. He'd even had investigators photograph me and David at public events, tracking the development of a relationship he'd never had the courage to acknowledge directly. One diary entry, dated 3 years after I'd left home, was particularly painful to read. Saw photos of Marcus volunteering at a homeless shelter today. He's helping other kids who've been abandoned by their families. The irony is devastating. The boy we threw away for not meeting our standards has become more compassionate and principled than anyone who stayed. I've created the very thing I was trying to prevent, a Blackstone who knows firsthand how cruel this family can be. Another entry from 5 years later. Marcus graduated summa cum laude today. I wanted to attend his graduation, to tell him how proud I am, to apologize for failing him so completely. But what right do I have to disrupt the life he's built without us? He's better off believing we don't care than knowing we're too cowardly to make amends. The reports detailed my relationship with David's family with surprising thoroughness. Grandpa Rick had known about Christmas dinners in California, about Rosa Martinez treating me like the son she'd never had, about David's father teaching me to change oil in their driveway while explaining that family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. He documented my professional success with the pride of a grandfather watching from afar. Copies of performance reviews, salary increases, and partnership discussions filled several folders. He'd even had investigators interview my colleagues anonymously to understand my reputation in the business community. Subject demonstrates exceptional analytical skills and ethical decision-making, one report noted. Colleagues consistently describe him as brilliant but humble, ambitious but fair. Multiple sources indicated he goes out of his way to mentor younger professionals and support colleagues facing personal difficulties. Reading these evaluations through my grandfather's eyes was surreal. He'd been watching me become the man he'd hoped I'd be, while I believed myself completely abandoned by anyone who shared my DNA. The family's campaign, March 15th, April 1st, 2024. My parents didn't give up after the will reading. They launched a systematic campaign to reestablish contact and influence my decisions about the company. The approaches varied in sophistication, but shared a common theme. They needed me, they loved me, and bygones should be bygones. My mother called daily, leaving voicemails that progressively shifted from emotional appeals to practical concerns. Marcus, honey, I know you're angry, but your father has 40 years of institutional knowledge about the company. You'll need experienced advisors. Then, sweetheart, I've been thinking about how we can make amends. What if we organized a family reunion so you can meet the cousins' children? They're all so excited to have Uncle Marcus back in their lives. My father took a more direct business approach. He sent detailed memos outlining Blackstone Industries' current challenges and his recommendations for addressing them. The subtext was clear. I needed his expertise to avoid destroying the family legacy through inexperience. Uncle Robert tried appealing to family tradition and responsibility. The Blackstone name means something in this country. He wrote in a long letter, "Your grandfather built something bigger than any individual family member. You have a responsibility to preserve that legacy, not just for us, but for future generations." The most manipulative approach came from my cousin Jennifer, who reached out through social media with carefully crafted messages about family healing and second chances. She'd become a family therapist after college and positioned herself as the neutral party who could facilitate reconciliation. "I've been studying family trauma and healing for my entire career," she wrote. "What happened to you was wrong, but holding on to anger hurts you more than it hurts anyone else. Our family has the opportunity to model real growth and change. Isn't that what you'd want to see happen?" None of them acknowledged the fundamental issue. They'd spent 12 years pretending I didn't exist, and their sudden interest in reconnection coincided exactly with learning about my inheritance. Their love was retroactive and financially motivated. Building new leadership, April 1st, June 1st, 2024. Instead of relying on family members who've proven their unreliability, I assembled a leadership team based on competence and character. Jennifer Walsh, my former boss, agreed to serve as chief financial officer after I convinced her that running a $12 billion conglomerate would be more interesting than managing private equity deals. For CEO, I recruited Maria Santos, who'd been running a mid-sized manufacturing company in Texas with remarkable success. Her background as a daughter of immigrants who'd built her career on merit rather than connections appealed to me. She understood the difference between earned and inherited success. The existing Blackstone Industries management team was surprisingly supportive of the transition. Many had worked for the company for decades and cared more about stability and growth than family politics. Several senior executives privately expressed relief that leadership was passing to someone with modern business training rather than my father, whose management style was considered outdated and increasingly problematic. Your grandfather was brilliant, but he micromanaged everything, explained Sarah Kim, the head of operations who'd been with the company for 15 years. Your father has the same controlling tendencies, but without the same strategic vision. We've been hoping for fresh leadership for years. The company's financial health was stronger than I'd expected. Grandpa Rick had modernized operations extensively in his final years, investing in technology and diversifying the business beyond traditional manufacturing. The transition to new leadership was relatively smooth because systems were already in place to operate efficiently. My first major decision was implementing profit sharing for all employees and establishing a charitable foundation focused on LGBTQ+ youth services and family reconciliation programs. The irony of using Blackstone money to help kids abandoned by their families wasn't lost on anyone, but it felt like the right way to honor both my grandfather's business legacy and my own experience. The final confrontation, June 15, 2024. 3 months after the inheritance, my parents requested a formal meeting to clear the air and discuss the future. They'd realized that emotional manipulation wasn't working and had shifted to a more direct business proposition. We met at the company's headquarters in Stamford, in the same conference room where I'd attended board meetings as a teenager, learning about business operations. My parents arrived with their attorney and a prepared presentation about their proposed roles in the new corporate structure. Marcus, we've put together a comprehensive plan for integrating our experience with your vision, my father began, sliding a bound proposal across the table. I would serve as chairman of the board, providing strategic oversight while you handle day-to-day operations. Your mother could manage the charitable foundation, given her experience with nonprofit work. Their proposal included generous salaries, equity positions, and decision-making authority that would essentially give them control over major company policies. It was a carefully crafted power grab disguised as family cooperation. We've also included provisions for other family members, my mother added. Robert could head the real estate division, Catherine could manage public relations, and Jennifer could establish an employee wellness program. Everyone contributes their expertise while healing our family relationships. I reviewed their proposal carefully, noting the financial terms that would provide them with millions in annual compensation plus profit sharing that would make them extremely wealthy. Their definition of healing apparently required significant monetary rewards. This is an interesting proposal, I said finally, but I have some questions about your qualifications for these positions. My father looked confident. I've been preparing to run this company my entire life. No one knows the business better than I do. That's true, I agreed. You've had 40 years to learn the business, but you've also had 40 years to demonstrate your character, and the results haven't been impressive. I opened my own folder and removed copies of the investigator reports Grandpa Rick had compiled. According to these documents, you've been embezzling from the company for the past 8 years. Fake consulting contracts, inflated expense reports, unauthorized bonuses approved for yourself through shell companies. The color drained from his face. Those reports are fabricated. Your grandfather was paranoid in his final years. The reports include bank records, canceled checks, and emails, I continued. Grandpa Rick knew exactly what you were doing, but he was planning to handle it privately after ensuring the succession was secure. Unfortunately, he died before implementing his plan. My mother tried to interrupt, but I wasn't finished. The proposal also mentions Mom managing the charitable foundation. That's interesting, considering she's never run a nonprofit and has consistently supported organizations that work against LGBTQ+ rights. The foundation's primary mission is helping LGBTQ+ youth, so that seems like a poor fit. We can learn, she protested. People can change and grow. People can change, I agreed, but they rarely do, especially when the motivation is financial rather than genuine. Your sudden acceptance of my sexuality coincides exactly with learning about my inheritance. That's not growth. That's opportunism. I closed the folder and looked directly at both of them. Here's my counterproposal. You can both maintain your current salaries for 1 year while transitioning out of company operations. After that, you'll receive the inheritances Grandpa Rick specified. $5 million for Dad, $2 million for Mom, and no further financial connection to Blackstone Industries. My father's facade finally cracked completely. You can't do this. I've given my entire life to this company. You've been gone for 12 years while I've been building the business. You've been stealing from the business, I corrected, and you gave your life to the company instead of to your family. That was your choice, but it doesn't entitle you to continue making those choices for the next generation. This is about revenge, my mother accused. You're punishing us for mistakes we made when you were a child. This is about consequences, I replied. You taught me that actions have consequences when you sent me to conversion therapy. I'm simply applying that lesson to your embezzlement and abandonment. Their attorney tried to intervene with threats about wrongful termination and family lawsuits, but Whitmore had prepared thoroughly for this possibility. The evidence of financial misconduct was overwhelming, and their abandonment of me provided clear justification for removing them from positions of trust. "You'll regret this," my father said as they prepared to leave. "You think you can run this company without institutional knowledge, but you'll destroy everything our family built." "Our family didn't build this," I corrected him one final time. "Individual Blackstones built this through hard work and smart decisions. The family part failed when you chose conformity over character. I'm not destroying the family legacy. I'm rebuilding it on a foundation of merit instead of inheritance." Moving forward, June 2024, present. 6 months after inheriting the Blackstone fortune, I've settled into a routine that balances business responsibilities with personal happiness. David and I moved to Connecticut so I could be closer to company headquarters, buying a beautiful modern house that reflects our taste rather than family tradition. The business continues to thrive under new leadership. We've expanded into renewable energy, increased employee benefits, and established mentorship programs for young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. The company's reputation has actually improved since distancing itself from family politics and focusing on ethical business practices. My relationship with David has grown stronger through this transition. He was initially concerned that massive wealth would change our dynamic, but we've maintained the same values and lifestyle that brought us together. He's established a free clinic for undocumented immigrants in Stanford, using his medical skills to serve people who need health care but can't afford it. The Blackstone family continues reaching out periodically, usually when they need money for various financial difficulties. My father's gambling problem has resurged now that he's lost access to company funds. My mother has joined several organizations working to reconnect families torn apart by lifestyle differences, apparently positioning herself as an expert on reconciliation despite never actually reconciling with her own son. I don't respond to their requests for financial help or family meetings. The lesson I learned 12 years ago, that love requires consistent action, not convenient words, still applies. They demonstrated their values when it mattered most, and those values don't align with the family I want to build. Instead, I've invested heavily in organizations supporting LGBTQ+ youth and family therapy programs. The Blackstone Foundation now provides scholarships for homeless teenagers, funds conversion therapy survivors, and supports research into family acceptance models. It's satisfying to use family money to help kids in situations similar to what I experienced. Reflections on family and forgiveness. People often ask me about forgiveness and whether I'll ever reconcile with my biological family. It's a complex question that doesn't have simple answers. I don't carry anger toward them anymore. Anger requires too much energy and accomplishes too little. But forgiveness doesn't require me to pretend their actions didn't reveal their character. My parents made a choice when I was 14. They chose their reputation over their relationship with me. They chose conformity over compassion. They chose to send me away rather than learn to love me as I was. Those choices had consequences for me, for them, and for our family. Now they want to make a different choice because the financial incentives have changed. That's not growth or evolution. It's opportunism. Real change would have involved reaching out when I was homeless, offering support when I was struggling, or celebrating my successes when I achieved them without their help. The most important lesson I've learned is that family isn't about DNA or shared last names. Family is about people who show up consistently, who love you through difficulties, who celebrate your successes without jealousy, and who support your authentic self rather than demanding you perform a character they find more acceptable. David's family became my real family years before I inherited billions of dollars. They loved me when I had nothing to offer except myself. That love was tested by time and difficulty, not corrupted by money and opportunity. The future, I'm still processing the emotional impact of learning that my grandfather had been watching and caring from a distance. Reading his private thoughts about our estrangement has provided closure I didn't know I needed. He made a terrible mistake in choosing family pressure over family love, but his regret was genuine and his final gesture was meaningful. The inheritance comes with responsibility to preserve jobs, grow the business, and honor the positive aspects of the Blackstone legacy while rejecting the toxic elements. I take that responsibility seriously, not because I owe my biological family anything, but because thousands of employees depend on the company's success for their livelihoods. Blackstone Industries will continue to evolve under leadership that values character over connections, merit over inheritance, and inclusion over conformity. The next generation of family leadership, if there is one, will be chosen based on qualifications and values, not last names or DNA. My parents and extended family will eventually have to build their own lives without access to the family fortune they expected to inherit. That's probably the best thing that could happen to them, the opportunity to discover who they are when their identity isn't defined by inherited wealth and status. As for me, I'm building the life I want with the person I love, using resources I never expected to have in service of values I've always held. The scared 14-year-old who was thrown out for being gay has become a confident adult who controls his own destiny and defines his own family. Epilogue: what family really means. If you've made it this far in my story, you might be wondering about the larger lessons or takeaways. For me, the experience has crystallized some truths about relationships, money, and authentic living that I think apply beyond my specific circumstances. First, love that depends on your ability to meet other people's expectations isn't really love. It's a transaction. Real love accepts you as you are while supporting you in becoming who you want to be. It doesn't require you to hide fundamental aspects of your identity to maintain other people's comfort. Second, money reveals character rather than changing it. My parents weren't loving people who became greedy when faced with an inheritance. They were people who had always prioritized financial security and social status over relationships. The inheritance just made their values more obvious. Third, family is something you build, not something you're born into. The most meaningful relationships in my life are with people who chose to love and support me consistently over time. DNA creates relatives. Choice creates family. Finally, sometimes the best revenge against people who underestimated you is simply living well and succeeding on your own terms. I didn't inherit billions of dollars to spite my parents, but knowing they have to read about my success in Forbes while struggling financially does provide a certain poetic justice. Do you think family obligations should supersede personal authenticity? Should wealth and inheritance come with automatic family reconciliation, regardless of past hurts? I'm curious about your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please share it with others who might need to hear that it's possible to build a meaningful life after family rejection. And remember, the family that matters most is the one that chooses to love you exactly as you are. Thanks for reading my story. Sometimes the best inheritance isn't money. It's the strength you develop when you learn to rely on yourself and the wisdom to recognize real love when you find it.